So this woman pulls a YouTube prank that's so horrific it ends up unaliving a man and nearly starts an international conflict. Now her name is Siti. She's 25, she's from Indonesia, but she's working in Malaysia as an escort. And she does that so she can send money back to her parents in Indonesia. But then one day, she meets a producer. The producer tells her he works for a production company of a huge YouTube channel. And they make like YouTube pranks and stuff. And he says he can get her an acting gig on his YouTube prank show. And the best part is that it pays pretty well. She can quit escort work, she can also make all this money and send it back to her parents in Indonesia. Plus, they're gonna pay her the equivalent of $96 per prank, which is a lot of money to Siti. So of course, she says yes. And pretty quickly, she's introduced to the head of the YouTube channel, this guy, Mr. Chang. And Mr. Chang and the other producers, they start getting her to pull these pranks on people in public. They'll like go to a public place and she'll like walk up to a total stranger and just randomly start holding their hand. Or they'll do a prank where they put like baby oil on her hands and she'll like run up behind a stranger and be like, guess who? Which smears the oil all over their face. It's pranks like that. And so she does a bunch of these pranks over the course of like a month. Meanwhile, the prank channel has also recruited this other woman to do pranks. Now her name is Dawn, and we'll get to her. But one day, the producers call Siti in to meet them at the airport because they're gonna do this big prank there. So she's there and she's with Mr. Chang, but Chang tells Siti there's actually another actress involved this time. And that actress will be doing the same thing, and it's Dawn. So the victim of this prank is actually gonna get double pranked. First by Siti, then by Dawn. But anyway, Mr. Chang pours a bunch of baby oil on Siti's hands, and then he points to a man out in the airport that he wants her to prank. This man. So minutes later, Siti sneaks up behind the man, and then from behind she puts her hands over his eyes, like guess who, or whatever. And of course, this smears the oil all over him. And then about 3 seconds later, Dawn approaches the man, and she smears her hand on his face as well. And then Siti and Dawn like giggle or whatever, and then they run away to the nearest bathroom to wash the oil off their hands. Meanwhile, the poor man, he's confused and a little freaked out, and he goes over to the airport security guards, and he tells them that some random women just like smeared something on his face, and that now he doesn't feel well. So security escorts the man to the airport medical center, and his condition quickly gets worse. Like, it is very apparent something is seriously wrong. So they rush him to the hospital, and on the way, he suddenly just dies. So who was this man? Well, let's call him Nam. Now, Nam is an interesting guy, because growing up, his dad was a dictator, the supreme leader of a little country you might have heard of called North Korea. Now, Nam, being the oldest son, he was always first in line to be the next supreme leader. But as he grew up and became an adult, Nam grew to be a little more progressive, a little more open-minded to reforming things for the better. Something his conservative dictator dad really didn't like. But one day, Nam is traveling abroad, and he's in Japan, in the airport. And suddenly, boom, he gets arrested. Why? Because he's traveling with a fake passport trying to conceal his identity. Turns out, Nam was in Japan because he's low-key trying to take his son to visit Tokyo Disney, which in his country is a huge no-no. And once the news of Nam's arrest gets back to Dictator is pissed. I mean, the heir to the throne can't be seen going to Disneyland in Tokyo? Disneyland represents capitalism, and worst of all, it represents America. And it's just everything North Korea stands against. So this arrest is a huge source of embarrassment for Dictator. And this Disneyland fiasco eventually leads to Nam being passed over for the position of supreme leader. And when Dictator eventually dies, his other son, Nam's half-brother, Kim Jong-un, he becomes the new dictator. And Kim Jong-un hates Nam. And Nam's been living internationally for a while in China. But regardless, Kim Jong-un has been trying to have him assassinated for years. And eventually, he and his regime come up with this elaborate plan. They're gonna trick 2 random women into unknowingly killing Nam. And the women end up being Siti and Dawn. And when Siti and Dawn are at the airport that day, the producers have both of them touch Nam's face with baby oil as a prank. But what Siti and Dawn don't know is that's not baby oil on their hands. No, on Siti's hands, they put, we'll just call it chemical A. And on Dawn's hands, they put what we'll call chemical B. And when you combine these 2 compounds, it creates a nerve agent called VX, or venomous agent X. A nerve agent that has been banned around the world because it's considered a weapon of mass destruction destruction and will kill you instantly, especially if someone smears it on your face. So Nam dies that day, right after they touch him. And Mr. Chang and all the other producers who set this up, they're all actually North Korean spies. And they all just flee, and they eventually get away. Of course, North Korea denies being involved in any of this. And this creates tensions between Malaysia and Indonesia. But since those producers all fled, that leaves the only two people connected to the crime, Siti and Doan. So Siti and Doan are in the airport bathroom washing their hands. And they walk out and they look around and all the producers are nowhere to be found. So Siti and Doan are just like, all right. And separately, the two women each go home. And they have no idea that anyone died. About a day later, they each get arrested. And Siti is so clueless as to what's going on, she literally thinks her arrest is part of the prank show. Like, haha, yeah, right, guys, sure, I'm being arrested, okay. But Malaysian police arrest them and they charge them with murdering Nam. 8 months later, their trial starts. And if Siti and Doan get convicted of murder, by law, they'll get the death penalty by hanging. So the stakes in this are really high. So this trial goes on for 2 years. And the Indonesian government has to get involved because Siti is technically their citizen. And these women are in jail this whole time. And then one day, suddenly, like out of nowhere, the charges against Siti are just dropped. And cool, Siti goes free. Apparently the Indonesian government was eventually able to intervene and they negotiated her release. While Doan does not get out, but she does plead guilty to a lesser charge and eventually they do let her go. Here's what Doan looks like in real life. And here's what Siti looks like in real life. Wow, a crazy story. Shout out to North Korea.